Hello and welcome to Empire with me, Anita Arnon.
And me, William Dalrymple.
Yes. So the last cliffhanger we left you on.
Yes.
Is it? Yeah, it's you again. No, yay, it's you again. So look, the last episode, we'd left you on the cliff edge, or rather mountain crag. The British ambassador to China, would-be British ambassador to China, Lord Macartney, has finally made it to the summer kingdom of the great emperor, the great Qing emperor. And, you know, they'd been, how many months have they been on the road? You said something extraordinary.
Been a year.
12 whole months on the road to try and get to see this man. And if you have not listened to the last episode, go back and listen to it. It's very funny. But all these gifts, which were really important to impress the emperor, they've had to leave behind in the capital of Beijing, because, you know, it's a trek into mountainous territory and everything would have been smashed to pieces. And they've learnt their lessons from previous embassies where lovely gifts, they think, are smashed to pieces in bumpy rides. So they leave all their stuff in the capital, Beijing. They have just gone, a small group, to go and greet the emperor. They have it in their minds that they're going to turn up and they're going to be embraced and, you know, it's going to be fabulous and a brave new world is going to open up of trade links and everybody getting very, very rich. Not quite. We left it on a big but, you know, really, a really very big but.
There is indeed a very big but. And the but is the kowtow. Now, in Chinese diplomatic protocol, there is no such thing as an ambassador to the court of China. There's merely submissive barbarians bringing tribute. And the first thing they have to do before they can be allowed to trade with the Middle Kingdom or to open diplomatic relations of any sort, they have to show their submission. And this is made very clear to the British Embassy by the officials who have been delegated to sort of teach them civilized behaviour.
And I need to explain what the kowtow is. So the kowtow, you know, actually it's passed into common parlance, you know, don't kowtow to his bullying behaviour. It means don't sort of give in completely and acquiesce completely. But the actual kowtow is the lowest, humblest sort of bow. So you're on your knees, so, you know, your big butt or your bottom in between your legs, and on your knees, and you lean down to the ground with your hands in front of you.
Bottom between your legs.
If you're sitting on your heels, that kind of thing, or, you know, if you're limber, in between. So look, and then you go down, so your head touches the ground, hands either side, and you touch the ground a number of times. That is the kowtow. It's as low as you can go in front of the great emperor, you know, to show that you are basically dust between his toes. That's what it is. And that is why it's not easy for a man representing Great Britain to do that, is it, William?
In the 18th century, no. They absolutely are forbidden from doing that by diplomatic protocol. So you have two, before anything else happens, you have two completely immovable and irreconcilable diplomatic protocols. The Chinese demand that you go flat on your face and worship the emperor, and George III has commanded that absolutely not. So Macartney initially tries to negotiate, and there's a lot of haggling with the officials. Is it okay if he goes down on one knee rather than two? Does he have to put his face on the ground? They spend a week knocking these ideas backwards and forwards. And they are completely unaware that this is absolutely the worst possible behavior in Chinese eyes.
It's really annoying them. It's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, this one knee thing? And Macartney comes back going, look, well, no, this is how we do it where I come from. You know, in front of our king, that's what we do. It's like a great, you know, humbling thing. Go down on one knee take the knee in front of the king. But the Chinese are having none of it. What's interesting, William, is that the Brits do not know how angry the Chinese are getting about this. They think they're having
Chinese
like a reasonable conversation. They're very polite to your face. But back in the, you know, back rooms of the imperial palace, they're like, what the hell are they doing? Who's ever heard of going down on one knee? What? This is not negotiable.
And particularly the emperor is incredibly angry and is about to kind of cancel all the audiences. As far as he's concerned, they've broken all diplomatic protocol already. And maybe they do sense this a bit, because what happens, we only learn much later when young George Thornton is advising a future diplomatic mission, is they basically decide to lie to their own bosses and to agree to kowtow,
but don't tell anyone.
Not to tell the British that they've done it.
Say we never done it.
And this, I say, only emerges in the Amherst mission, the next attempt to open diplomatic relations, when the Chinese say, but the last lot did it in the end. And they say, no, they absolutely didn't. We've got his book here. Young George Staunton, who is now a middle-aged MP, or even a now rather senior MP, admits that there was fibbing going on.
That he did do it.
They did do it, but didn't include it in the official record of what went on. So having, without realizing it, completely pissed off every official in the Chinese court and made the emperor irate with fury, they finally get their audience and go down flat on their faces as they had been asked to do. Mm-hmm. I think they have a few gifts, maybe the weaponry or something. They've really got a few
things, swords and things, whatever that you can carry. Yeah, but not the biggies, not the big ticket items. They're not there.
And they give what the Chinese regard as their tribute, and also, of course, the Chinese, as Jahangir had been centuries earlier in the Mughal court, were incredibly disappointed by the presents because they were not only had they left the best ones behind, but rumours of how wonderful these presents were going to be had gone ahead of them. And everyone, it's slightly like Christmas, when you find that everyone's giving you the present you don't want.
They brought the equivalent of socks. They brought
and a woolly jersey
to the emperor. Oh no! Okay.
Exactly.
Oh, you shouldn't have.
I never understood how socks became a
really
thing anyway to give.
Mm-hmm.
But right up to this point, Macartney has no idea of how offended the emperor is. We know because the Chinese records survive. And 4 days before the audience, the Qianlong emperor was already so furious about Macartney's dithering that he had issued an edict to his ministers expressing great displeasure with the British and declaring that he would no longer show them any extra favours. And I think the officials just don't communicate this. So there's a lot of fibbing going on both sides. The British are not telling their bosses what they're actually doing, and the Chinese officials are not carrying the message from the emperor.
Right. So, I mean, when you say that the emperor has pretty much cut them off, what has he said exactly that's not being transmitted? That he's not going to do a deal, he's not going to meet them again. They can do one with their socks and leave. I mean, how angry is he?
The message that the emperor gives to his officials is that he had originally planned to let Macartney stay for a while and enjoy the sights of Jehol, which I can witness from personal experience, and well worth seeing. This most gorgeous place. And it's a place that takes several days to see. And I've been to the audience hall there, which is this gorgeous sort of wooden miniature of the Forbidden City, moved to this hill station, the mid-woods.
Okay, describe it in words, because
there
are people who've not been to the Forbidden City, me, and there are people who haven't been to this one in Geelong. So what does it look like?
The Forbidden City is sort of spectacular and vast, and it's like it's like something sort of 5 or 6 times the size of Buckingham Palace, with a whole succession of courtyards. Finally reached the final audience hall. This in Jehol is a miniature version of that, and these lovely little wooden pavilions in woods. It's utterly heavenly, and when you go there today, you see all the Qianlong Emperor's robes and all that sort of stuff on display there. It's wonderful. So anyway, the message goes out from the emperor to the officials that the British embassy has caused His Majesty great displeasure. They are told that they can keep the gifts that were planned for them, he says, and hold the meetings that had been promised, but otherwise they were cut off. Now, this isn't clearly passed on, or certainly if it is passed on, it's done in such diplomatically oleaginous way that the British just miss the point of it. And they don't realize that the emperor has ticked them off for, as he puts it, their presumption and self-importance.
Right,
which is, I mean, it's quite strong stuff.
No, but doesn't it get stronger with him? Because he says, when they say, look, these aren't actually the proper gifts. The socks are not. They're just a token. We've got better things than the socks. And he says, look, strange and costly objects do not interest me. We possess all the things. I set no value on objects strange or ingenious, and I have no use for your country's manufacture. I mean, that is a stinging rebuke.
This also is relayed back to Britain because they can't sort of avoid saying
they can't trade. You've got no trade deal because he says he doesn't like any of your stuff.
And then he adds, just to sort of add insult to injury, he says, when foreigners come seeking audience with me, and when they are sincere and submissive, then I always treat them with kindness, says the emperor. but if they come in arrogance, they get nothing. So slightly like sort of going to see Trump at the moment if it was Zelensky. He gets a diplomatic ticking off. But again, with the kind of bullheadedness of the British at this period, are completely unaware that they have completely failed, even before they got their audience. In the edict which the Qianlong Emperor issues, the official edict to George III, he says that China has no need for increased trade with Britain, or indeed has no use for the establishment of a permanent British embassy.
It's a total failure.
A total failure. But because there's no one that can actually properly read Chinese with the expedition,
I love this.
amazingly,
I love this.
They don't know that they've been given sort of null point.
Can I just say, dwell on this for 1 second, because they took 11-year-old little George with them, little George Staunton, who says, yes, Daddy, I speak fluent Chinese. I did. I've done all my homework. No one can read the rebuke. No one. So they must open this scroll and just assume
and wave happily, thank you, sir.
This is great. We'll take this back. This is lovely. This must only say, love the socks. Can't wait to see the rest of it. That's what it says. They're happy. They think it's gone well.
I mean, they imagine that they're now going to go down to Beijing, that everyone's going to see the presidents, and it's all going to carry on. It's all going to be lovely. In fact, the scroll that they've been getting says emphatically that the request for a British ambassador to remain in the capital is, quote, not consistent with the customs of this our empire, and therefore cannot be allowed. And he acknowledges, the emperor, that foreign missionaries have, on occasion, been allowed to live in Beijing. And in fact, at this moment, Dinwiddie is hanging out with some foreign missionaries, some Jesuits in Beijing, who are interested in his lenses and hot air balloons.
Because they're good. They're good lenses. Dinwiddie's brought really good stuff. Yeah.
But he says very clearly that these missionaries and anyone else who desires to live in the capital must adopt such a position that he must immediately put on Chinese dress, dwell with the society assigned to him, and cannot return to his country.
Wow.
So these guys are there for life.
Wow. Can anyone read that out to them? Did they understand that? Did Dinwiddie with his telescope, did he understand it? No, he didn't even understand it.
I think it's when they get to Beijing, and we're going to come to that in a minute, that the penny begins to drop. And quite possibly because they meet someone who can read Chinese.
All right. So then what happens next? Because this is all just unfolding in a terrible way.
And so the final paragraph of this edict, he lets it be known that he has given the British Embassy already an abundance of gifts, and that they should simply be grateful and go home.
Wow.
All these gifts which Macartney has been worrying about, the Qianlong Emperor merely notes that he'd accepted them not because he actually wanted them, but merely as, quote, tokens of your own affectionate regard for me.
Oh.
So the two most arrogant nations in the world, with the two biggest empires, have met, completely misunderstood each other, and the whole thing has been a spectacular failure. And his final words are, in truth, as the greatness and splendor of the Chinese empire have spread its fame far and wide, and as foreign nations from 1,000 parts of the world crowd hither over the mountains and seas to pay us homage and to bring us the rarest and most precious offerings, what is it that we can want with you here? And then this final words that you've already said, strange and costly objects do not interest me. We possess all things. I set no value on objects, strange or ingenious, and we have not the slightest use for your country's manufacture.
So can I just say, it is the answer. It's meant to be a rhetorical question. What do you buy for the man who has everything? And the emperor answers it, nothing that you've got.
I've already got it.
I don't care. But lovely Dinwiddie, who I have a soft spot for because he's a scientist. I like scientists, as anyone who listens to this podcast will know. He's just beavering away, putting up his stuff, putting up his lenses, putting up his planetarium, because, you know, he's brought it thousands and thousands of miles. And they are still thinking that these lustres and these globes and the clocks, I mean, clocks are really special in Britain. And, you know, he's setting everything up, putting it all in the right places to make, as he puts it, a very beautiful appearance, which he thinks is, again, quote, much admired by the Chinese, because the polite Chinese people around him are going, oh, no, it's terrific. It's good effort.
Everyone's going to love this.
Well done, Dinwiddie. Oh, this is going to be fabulous. Oh, well done you. However, the emperor does then deign to look at this stuff, doesn't he, when he comes back from jail?
He first of all issues a second edict, which is even more damning than the first.
Oh, no.
He indicates, just because I think now, the penny is not fully dropping, but the embassy is beginning to realize that they're not being treated they haven't been, given the second audience. They haven't seen the emperor again. They were thinking they were going to come and stay for at least a year and make a great study and make friends. Clearly, upset that the British are not left already. The emperor then, to make it even more clear, and not realizing that the British can't read the edicts that he's giving them, sends the second one. And he says that he has complete satisfaction with the existing trade arrangements. In other words, that the Brits are just stuck on one little stretch of river in Canton and can't move even into Canton, never mind anywhere else in the empire. He says, and it's a wonderful assertion of self-confidence, the products of our empire are abundant, and there is nothing we do not have. So we have never needed trade with foreign countries to give us anything we lacked. However, he went on, tea, porcelain, and silk that China produced, he understood were essential needs for countries like England that did not have them.
So patronising.
And so, out of the great good of our dynasty, we have long permitted foreign merchants to come to Canton and purchase such goods to satisfy your needs and allow you to benefit from our surplus. Trade, in other words, he's saying, had always been a favour on China's side to lesser nations. And he then ends the letter by telling the King of England, George III, that England is just one of many countries that come to trade with us. And if I give Britain special treatment, then they will all want to have it as well. So,
yes. I mean, yeah. If we let you, everyone else is going to want some. So this is crushing for Macartney. This must, because he must know he's going to have to go back with nothing. And after all this fuss, it's just going to be a disaster.
They're still holding out for Dinwiddie to save the day, and that only one hot air balloon ride will really
balloon over Beijing. I mean, they're going to love it. It's going to be amazing. Yeah,
they will love it. Exactly. That's what they're still hoping for. But on October the 1st, the emperor, who has come down from Johor back to the capital because it's now cold up in the capital. October is the beginning of the cold weather in Manchuria. Comes down and he does a 2-minute tour of this planetarium, which
should have taken hours. Which Dinwiddie has set this up so it takes hours, and he can give lectures and teach them things that he spent a lifetime learning. Oh, poor Dinwiddie!
And his comment, which he gives as he's leaving, is, "It is good enough to amuse children." That's the emperor's final crushing.
There's another really gorgeous thing, because Dinwiddie, who's only sort of a minor apparatchik in the scheme of things, if you're dealing with the great emperor, he has to watch, and he's watching from sort of almost round a corner with a mirror, the reflection, because you can't look directly at the emperor. So, when you've got this little pocket watch and you want to see if the boy in the class really does like you and is looking, he's sort of like, he's looking into this mirror and he sees the emperor doing this 2-minute dash around the stuff that has literally taken him a lifetime.
30 years
to put together. 2 minutes. And what he says is that he just has this inscrutable face and shows absolutely no emotion. Imagine how crushing that is to poor Dinwiddie, who, stayed behind to make it all perfect and all lovely. And 30 years of his life have gone into this for 2 minutes. A man who's just clearly bored.
So that's October the 1st. And on October the 6th, the emperor notices that these barbarians are still there. He's dismissed them in Johor. I told you to go. And so finally, on the 6th, they're literally kicked out.
So look, with what ostensibly feels very much like an Airbnb overstay, where you've been told, right, you were told to go. You were told to go 6 days ago. Why are you still here? Let's help you with your bags. Let's take a break. And when we come back after the break, find out what happens next.
Welcome back. So we are in Beijing, and the first ever British embassy to China has just been kicked out.
Of their Airbnb.
They were told to leave 6 days earlier, but they didn't realise.
Because no one can read what they're being told. No one can understand it.
And so the penny finally drops. Poor old Dinwiddie is not going to be able to float in a hot air balloon over the Chinese emperor. They're not going to be able to show their mastery of pyrotechnics and artillery. And
they brought a diving bell. They were going to go underwater.
None of that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And despite the protests of now a completely hysterical Dinwiddie, the Chinese start packing everything up because the British are not doing it themselves.
Yes, let's help you. Let's help you out here.
So they just start throwing all these lenses into boxes, and Dinwiddie's screaming, no, let me put the wool and the cotton wool and everything else. In the journal, Macartney is still trying to put a good spin on it. But as one of his servants puts it in his diary, we entered Beijing like paupers, we remained in it like prisoners, and we quitted it like vagrants.
Oh, now they understand.
It's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. And for a man, again, I describe it as a posho, but he comes from a dignified family. He is the man who served in Russia. It is not like he's some hick off the boat. He knows about diplomacy, or he thinks he knows about diplomacy. And this was meant to be his 1 foot on Mars. He was meant to be that pioneer. And instead, he's sort of chased off with his tail between his legs. Right. So then what happens to a proud man like that?
So Macartney initially doesn't really, obviously tries to put as good a spin as he's heading back to England. He's trying to put as good a spin in it, but it's Staunton, George Staunton, who writes an honest account.
The elder, or the 11-year-old, or the blabby 11-year-old who's filling his pockets with the wall of China. His dad. Okay, right.
And Staunton's account, which comes out a few months after Macartney's the following year, reveals in the fullness the complete and utter diplomatic failure and humiliation that this entire embassy has been. And Macartney becomes a standing joke.
So Staunton has written an account. However, I thought, actually, the one who really spills the beans is his valet. He's got a slightly sort of sober version that it didn't go very well, whereas Macartney might want to say, no, it went as well as can be expected. Staunton takes that expectation down to a realistic level, that it wasn't as great as we thought it would be, and maybe next time don't send socks. But it is his valet who goes and says, basically, we were booted round the kingdom. We were told to get out. It was all awful. And that is the thing. The valet's account of this trip is what hits the papers. And the papers then start making absolute merriment at Macartney's expense. He becomes a figure of fun. They start doing cartoons of Macartney where he's really awkward and kind of all angular and trying to sort of kowtow in front of the emperor, which he was told not to do. And he's surrounded by, in these cartoons, these visual depictions with sort of these over-bloated Chinese officials who are just looking at him with nothing but disdain. So for a man who has already had the stress of almost 2 years of trying to prepare for, try and meet the emperor with all of these high promises of I'm the man who can do this, is now absolutely debased as a diplomat. His whole world comes crashing down, and kind of there's something rather neat that it's a kiss and tell from the valet that kind of does for him.
It's rather like sort of Lady Diana's story. It's one of the
butler,
writing
or a butler doing their own account. Because even Staunton's account, and you're right, Staunton kind of lowers the expectations, that it didn't go quite as well as we hoped it would. And little George, it turns out, needs to do a bit more work on his Chinese. But it's the valet what done it. It feels like it's total and complete humiliation with the caricatures and the laughter. Once people are laughing at you, it's like nowhere else to go. Or does he manage to save some, or does this embassy manage to save some shreds of dignity?
The embassy doesn't, but you can say that in one way, the British, or certainly the East India Company, get the last laugh. Because although the emperor is simply not interested in opening diplomatic relations, having an embassy in Beijing, giving any more access to the British than they've already got, they don't actually cancel the existing arrangements. It isn't like they're so angry at the bad and barbaric behavior that they close down Canton. And even as the embassy is being sent home in disgrace, and even as the poor Dinwiddie's telescopes are being packed, the trade in opium is growing and growing. What had been a major deficit of the British, with giving all their gold to the Chinese to buy the tea and having nothing to sell in return, that is being eroded by the sheer quantity of opium which is being sold, even as the Macartney Embassy is heading back to London.
So, I mean, you're suggesting that balance of payment is not as completely out of whack as it was. I mean, tell me about the scale. I mean, what kind of money and what kind of import are we talking about?
So what's happening is that the Chinese are consuming more and more opium. There's been this change in the way it's consumed. It used to be drunk or swallowed as pills. But the innovation that began in Java of smoking opium, what you do is take a little ball of opium, and an expert in this rolls it around in a flame so that it nearly catches fire but doesn't. And then you put it into an opium pipe and smoke it. And this is highly intoxicating and highly addictive. And this is apparent in the sales of opium to China, which are increasing even as the embassy is retreating. So when the Macartney Embassy is originally planned in the late 1760s and early 1770s, there's only about 200 chests of East India Company opium which is being sold to China. But by the time that the embassy is heading away, it's increased to 1,000. In other words, it's gone up 5 times. That continues so that by 1800, just 20 years later, the figure grows up to about 5,000 chests of opium. In other words, it increases again 5 more times. So this is the beginnings of the undermining of Qing China. So this great edifice of a proud empire, which was so self-confident that they could say they had no interest in the gewgaws that the British were showing to them, is being undermined in multiple ways. First of all, the balance of payments. The Chinese have been very rich on the tea trade, but now Spanish silver, which is the currency that they use, is now beginning to flow out of China rather than into it. Secondly, there's a major problem of addiction, particularly in the upper classes, particularly in the Mandarin classes and the urban rich. It's now not only addictive, but fashionable and addictive. And it's making more and more of the population, putting them out of work, really, because all they want to do is lie back each day and horizontal and smoke their pipe of opium. But also, crucially, it's beginning to create a whole wave of criminality and violence associated with the sales, because like, a modern cocaine trade, you need to bribe officials, you need to deal through gangsters because it's illegal, and the gangsters are becoming richer and the officials are becoming more and more corrupt. So
there's a crime wave, because you need thugs to get it in, you need thugs to try and trade it, who can get around the law. And we'll be seeing
more of this in the next episode. But while the British have left with their tail behind their legs in one way, the traders are still there. And remember that the traders are, and we'll be dealing with this more in the next episode, but the traders are actually not East India Company. The East India Company make the opium, they grow it, they sell it at auction in Calcutta, and they leave it to others, often Indians, Parsis from Bombay, many of them, but also independent traders, many of whom are Scots, and they do the illegal trade. They're the guys liaising with the gangsters off the coast of China, not landing it officially in Canton, but in islands like Hong Kong and other offshore islands where the gangsters hang out. This, in time, will lead not just China, but also the whole world of Southeast Asia to crumble under the face of these assaults. The growing criminality, the drain of silver, the undermining of society, and the crime wave that goes with it. So 2 proud empires have met face to face. They've completely misunderstood each other, and it looks like the British have lost. But in actual fact, the British are undermining everything that gave the emperor the reasons for his pride and the ability to look down on the British.
Can I just ask one final thing, because we're coming to the end of this podcast, but are they doing it with the desire to undermine this power base, or are they doing it just because of the money, honey?
It's just the money. The guys, the Brits who are selling this illegally off the coast of China are Scots who are hard-headed businessmen, have got no interest in anything but self-improvement and making a fortune. There's a whole bunch of Parsis from Bombay who they're collaborating with, who are often doing the hard work, buying the opium both from the East India Company and from Indian growers in Malwa, and they're trading out through Karachi and Bombay, which is why Karachi and Bombay initially become these very rich cities.
Thriving
the
port
opium
cities.
trade.
Yeah.
And indeed Singapore. So all the pieces are now in place for the humiliation and the undermining of Chinese society. And the end of this story is the complete colonial takeover of a great deal of the Far East.
Well, listen, the next episode, we are going to talk about two men who find themselves at the very heart of this illegal trade. Names which may not be unfamiliar to you even today. The names of Jardine and Matheson. So if you want to hear that a little bit early, you know what you have to do. You have to join our club, because then you get all of these things in one go and listen whenever you like. empirepoduk.com is where you will find us. And in the club, you don't just get early access to episodes, you get reading lists, you get our newsletter, you get a thriving community of listeners to chat to. So till the next time we meet, it is goodbye from me, Anita Arnhem.
And goodbye from me, William Dalrymple.